Hello everyone, welcome back. In this segment, we will be talking about heuristics. Heuristics are mental shortcuts we use to process information. They act as simple rules for making complex decisions or drawing conclusions efficiently in a short duration. The human mind has a limited capacity for information processing. If any information input crosses this threshold, it leads to a state of information overload, where efficient and productive mental processing will get inhibited. Information overload can also be a consequence of stress or the bombarding of information from multiple sensory modalities. It is important to note that the human mind is not perfectly rational in decision making. For a purely rational decision, organisms might have to consider all possible benefits and weigh them at the cost of losses. Heuristics thus evolved in organisms to deal with information overload, to stretch their cognitive resources for processing complex information effortlessly or automatically. Heuristics have helped organisms deal with uncertain conditions where quick action is required to survive, rather than allowing the rational brain to evaluate details of the environment bit by bit. An essential limitation of all heuristics is that they might lead to biased inferences in situations requiring more elaborate information processing. So this video further elaborates on the different types of heuristics with examples. It also attempts to review existing literature that elucidates the cultural differences in the expression or usage of these heuristics. Let's look at the first one, which is representativeness heuristic. The more a person or an object resembles a match or a group, the more likely it is that they belong to that specific group. Throughout our lives and experiences, we develop prototypes of objects and persons we come across regularly. These prototypes include a basic set of attributes of a person or an entity that must be sufficiently possessed for them to be fitting into a particular category. For example, an external prototype of a car would have 4 wheels, steering, gear system, minimum of 4 doors. Any new object that fulfills these criteria is automatically perceived as a car by a perceiver, or at least an automobile, which is something other than bikes, or a four-wheeler. Another example would be that anyone who wears a khaki shirt and pants with a gun and badge on the chest is recognized as a police officer by most Indians. These appearances make up the prototype of police officers. The heuristic is also used when we are attributing causes to some consequences. When people attribute causes to a particular consequence, some expect the consequence's magnitude to match with the cause. They think that a high-level consequence should have a high-level cause. During this process of causal attribution, we can observe a lot of cultural differences between Asians and Americans. A study conducted by Spina and others found that more people in Asian cultures tend to emphasize the presence of elementary and minor causes that contribute to a consequence despite its magnitude. On the other hand, people from American cultures tend to believe that large-scale causes lead to severe or large-scale consequences. One of the most critical limitations of this heuristic is that judgments are usually made based on visually representative features by ignoring the base rates or frequencies of the category in the whole population. For example, there are more Indian homemakers than are school teachers who wear saris. So any woman with a sari is more likely to be a housewife than a teacher in the Indian context. Next is the anchoring and adjustment heuristic. Anchors are arbitrary starting points or a value that is ascribed to an object. These anchors are used to make further adjustments. In economic discourse, if a seller says that a car costs 10 lakh rupees, he has set an anchor of 10 lakh rupees for the buyer. The buyer then might bargain with the seller to eventually reduce the price to 9 lakh, to which the seller might agree. The buyer might feel that this reduction of 1 lakh is a terrific deal, but seldom does he know that the car's actual price was 8 lakh. The seller just presented the buyer with a high anchor. This strategy has far-reaching implications in consumer psychology, as presenting high anchors and selling with a relatively lower price makes any vulnerable buyer feel that they had profited from the transaction, when in turn they were deceived. You would have experienced this heuristic when you usually order things on Amazon. The price of a product is just presented in a way that they would have struck a higher price beside it and given a relatively lesser price. This makes us believe that we are getting the product at a significant discount. Another context in which this heuristic plays out is during food consumption behavior. People tend to overeat in situations when a high quantity of food is offered, irrespective of gender, age, body mass index, etc., compared to a situation where less food is served. This phenomenon is called the portion size effect. A study conducted by Monica indicates that students from India were more susceptible to anchoring heuristic bias relative to students from Poland. Indian students were approximately twice more susceptible to the anchoring heuristic than the students of Poland. One hypothesis that explains this discrepancy is that people in Western cultures have a higher risk or uncertainty avoidance. They emphasize specific elements during decisional processes compared to people in Asian cultures who make decisions holistically and more pragmatic. The third one is the availability heuristic. Sometimes we rely on information that is more readily accessible from our memory. This heuristic involves judging frequencies based on the ease with which we can bring specific instances to our mind. If someone asks how often you order food from outside and you can recall quite a number of instances, it is likely that you would say you frequently order in. This happens without even consciously evaluating the number of times you ordered food by checking bills or your phone. The most important downside of this heuristic is that it can result in overestimating the probability of certain events just because we can recall many such instances that we either heard in the news or were dramatic or experienced ourselves. This can consequently lead to faulty decision making. Examples could be people tending to overestimate the frequency of murders than deaths due to heart attacks or accidents or airplane accidents than road accidents. This again is because we hear news about the former in much more dramatic way than the latter components. We really hope this video contributed to your understanding of heuristics. If you have any questions, do comment, and if you like the video, please share and subscribe. See you all in the next one.